The Supreme Court just hit the mute button on President Trump's sweeping tariffs. The rules of the game just changed, and investors are about to pay or get paid based on who understands that first. Today I'm breaking down what the Supreme Court actually struck down, what still survives, and 5 ripple effects that matter for your money. Stay to the end because there's a wild card most people are glossing over: the refund question and what it could do to profits, inflation, and even Treasury yields. Alright, first, what just happened? On Friday, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that President Trump's big, across-the-board tariffs were illegal. Here is the simplest way to understand it. There is a law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. Think of IEEPA as the in case of emergency break glass law for the economy. It lets a president block transactions, freeze assets, and restrict certain trade during a declared national emergency. Trump took that tool, which was designed for sanctions, and tried to use it as a tariff cannon. The court said Trump can't, because tariffs are taxes, and taxes are Congress's job per the Constitution. Now, which tariffs were we talking about? 2 big buckets. Bucket 1, the drug trafficking tariffs. A 25% duty on most imports from Canada and Mexico, and a 10% duty on most imports from China. Bucket 2, the global reciprocal tariffs. At least 10% on basically everything entering the US, with dozens of countries facing much higher rates. The effective US tariff rate had jumped up into the high teens, the highest levels since the 1930s. Then the court struck it down. Now, before you high-five your Amazon cart, the reality is new tariffs are coming. The Supreme Court decision blocks tariffs imposed using IEEPA, but it does not erase every tariff in America. There are other lanes. The White House did not even wait for the ink to dry. Trump said he would sign an executive order to impose a 10% global tariff using Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. That law lets the president impose tariffs for up to 150 days. Then Congress has to extend it. And that cliff matters because investors hate 2 things: uncertainty and deadlines. So the Supreme Court didn't end tariffs. It ended one specific way of doing tariffs, and it pushed trade policy into a new phase. Slower, more procedural, and probably more chaotic. Now we can talk about what it means to investors. To pay tariffs, companies often pass the cost to consumers, cause more inflation. With tariffs in limbo, every investor asks, who was paying this and who can now keep prices high while costs drop? The result is ripple effects that matter for your money. Ripple effect number 1. Companies that import a lot just got a cost headwind removed. Retailers, apparel, home goods, and e-commerce. But here's the investor lens. Prices are sticky and discounts are optional. If a company has pricing power, it might keep prices where they are and rebuild margins. On the other hand, if competition is intense, companies might cut prices to win customers back. That can boost volume, but it changes who wins. Because the winner is the company with supply chain flexibility, not the company with the biggest logo. Ripple effect number 2, inflation expectations. Tariffs raise input costs, push up prices. When inflation stays hot, the Fed stays hawkish, which means borrowing costs stay high and growth stocks look less cute. So when tariffs get knocked down, does the Fed finally have room to cut? On Friday, traders started pricing in rate cuts more aggressively. The market drank an espresso. But inflation does not reverse like a light switch. A lot of companies already locked in higher prices and rerouted supply chains. You will not feel this at the checkout counter tomorrow. The bigger effect is forward-looking. Lower tariff pressure reduces the risk of future inflation surprises. and markets price the future, not your receipt from Target. Ripple effect number 3. Tariff refunds. When you mess with tariffs, you mess with corporate cash flow. The court did not lay out a clean refund plan, and observers warn it could be a legal mess. But even the possibility of refunds changes behaviour right now. If you are a retailer expecting tariff refunds, you start rebuilding inventory and ramping promotions. That is why on Friday, digital advertising stocks moved. Alphabet was up around 4%. Pinterest jumped. Analysts connected the dots. Easing tariff pressure means more ad spend from retail clients. Ripple effect number 4. Tariff revenue. The US Treasury collected over $133 billion from import taxes as of December. If refunds come into play, that is a federal budget story. Less revenue, bigger deficit, more borrowing, upward pressure on Treasury yields. So you get a tug of war. Lower tariffs reduce inflation pressure, which is good for bonds. But losing tariff revenue worsens the deficit picture, which is bad for bonds. That push and pull is why the bond market is going to watch Washington like a playoff game. Ripple effect number 5. Policy uncertainty. The Supreme Court took away one tariff lever. The administration still has Section 232, Section 301, Section 122, and Section 338. The risk is not tariffs or no tariffs. The risk is tariff whiplash. And whiplash makes companies freeze. If you are a CEO and you do not know your input costs 90 days from now, you delay investment, delay hiring, and overpay for redundancy. Uncertainty acts like a tax because it lowers the return on taking risk. And when that return drops, valuations compress. So what do you do? Here is your playbook. Number 1. Which legal lane the White House picks next? A 10% global tariff under Section 122 expires in 150 days. A Section 232 investigation targets specific industries. A Section 301 case requires hearings and takes months. Each lane has a different speed, and the speed tells you how long markets stay nervous. Number 2. Earnings calls, not cable news. Listen for 3 phrases: tariff headwind, pricing actions, and supplier diversification. If companies can hold prices while costs drop, that is margin expansion. If they are discounting to hold demand, different story. Number 3. The macro trio. Inflation prints, treasury yields, and the dollar. If yields are rising while inflation is falling, that is the deficit talking. If the dollar moves hard, it changes how tariffs translate into real prices. And if inflation stays sticky, the Fed will not care that a tariff got struck down. Here is a super simple framework to think about your portfolio exposure. Group A. Importers who compete on price. They win when tariffs fall, if they can hold demand. Group B. Domestic producers sheltered by tariff walls. They lose if those walls come down. Group C. Picks and shovels plays. Logistics, automation, reshoring. They win because everyone else is adapting. You do not need to predict every executive order. You just need to know which bucket you own. Bottom line, the Supreme Court just kneecapped Trump's ability to use emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs. Trump has already signaled a 10% global tariff under a different law. The longer game is about policy paths, inflation, and corporate margins. Watch the boring stuff, the legal lane, the timing, and earnings calls. If this helped you, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. What sector do you think is most tariff sensitive right now? See you next week.